Well, time for our regular catch-up on all things technology, some of the big stories around the future of work and home and life that you may have missed during the week. And joining us to chat us through some of the more interesting technology developments over the past little while is Matthew Dickerson, a technologist based in Dubbo. Morning, Matthew.
Hey, good morning, Ewing. Things are changing a lot at the moment. Just with everyone in lockdown, things are focusing on technology, which is fantastic, Ewan.
Well, especially for a technologist like you, Matthew. How is Dubbo, just before we sort of kick off this morning? How are you kind of going with the lockdown and sort of no real light at the end of the tunnel just yet, really, in terms of when that might lift?
Yeah, there's a bit of a lockdown malaise, I think, setting in, Ewan. I think people are pretty well sick of it, and they're starting to probably get to the stage where they say, I can just slip out to the shops. No one will notice if I go out there. So I just see a little bit of that creeping in at the moment. The streets are actually a little bit busier than they were a week ago. Still pretty quiet, but I just think people are getting a bit sick of being locked up.
Yeah, indeed. And, of course, we'll get a bit more detail on exactly what the future there might look like in an hour or so's time this morning. Now, turning back to technology, which is a good way of filling in time, of course, when you're in lockdown. And we've got some terrific stories to talk about this morning. I'm most excited about talking about smart toilets in the not-too-distant future, Matthew. But let's start with this is an experience that all of us can attest to. You ring up a call centre for whatever it is, and you find it very, very hard to actually understand some of the time what they're saying back to you because of it sounds robotic, or they're clearly in another country and perhaps don't get the nuances in the way that we speak.
Yeah, that's right. And anyone that's been to another country around the world knows that without noticing it, before too long, you're in America, for example, you start saying sidewalk instead of footpath, or you might start saying the word car instead of car. You start to mimic the accent of people that you're around. And I think that's part of human nature, just to fit in as a group, we start to mimic that. Now, when you ring a call centre, and obviously it's a global economy and call centres are definitely part of that global economy, they haven't got time really to start to mimic our accent. We might be on the phone, we might wait on hold for an hour or so, but we might only be on the phone for someone there for maybe 3 or 4 minutes. So, of course, technology jumps into the middle of all that situation. One of the things the experimenters tried, or the researchers tried with this, was to actually get the call centre person to talk, and then an AI computer jumped in the middle and took what they said and then reprocessed that completely, and then had the computer talk back to the person at the other end. They could get the voice perfect, but the delay was too much. It just was obviously too hard to have a conversation when this computer jumped in the middle to basically reprocess everything. So where they've arrived at now is the AI kind of does something similar to that, but when it's in the middle, it just lets the voice go through, and it just adjusts the voice ever so subtly. So if you and I are on a call centre now and I was the call centre operator, it would be listening to your voice, picking up on just that accent, that local orange accent, and then adjusting it ever so slightly and bring it to my end. And then when I spoke back to you, it would just change the voice, just change some subtleties. It's not going to change the words. It's not going to change sidewalk for footpath for that example I used before, but it's just going to change the twang and the slight subtleties of my voice. So you think you're speaking to someone that actually sounds like more local to you. And exactly as you said, that will help people understand. So those really strong accents will be taken a bit out of those accents, and also just make you feel more comfortable because you feel like you're talking to someone more local. And it's quite incredible. There are Perth accents, there are Melbourne accents, there are Sydney accents. So even though we think we're all Aussies, even in the one country, you get those subtleties in difference of language.
Do you think there really are a difference between twangs between Orange and Dubbo people?
Probably not Orange and Dubbo. I might have been going too far there.
Part of the issue, though, and I don't know whether you know the answer to this, Matthew, but when you ring call centres, and there are some call centres that seem to be worse at this than others, they might sound like they're in Australia, for example, but the way that the call centre operates, it clearly gets the audio gets pumped through some kind of computer or compressor, and it's very harsh sounding in your ears, and you often think, look, if I was just speaking to this person face to face, yes, they've got an accent, but I'm sure I'd be able to better hear them than the sort of compressed noise that comes down the phone line.
Yeah, and that part of that situation there is it's a slightly different problem, that one. That's really just the amount of bandwidth they've got available to them from wherever they might be, whether it might be in the Philippines or India, and then back to Australia. So they're trying to compress that voice as much as possible. And whenever you do compression, I mean, you'd know from radio, whenever you compress any sound at all, you're going to lose some quality. How much quality you lose depends on how much compression there is. And so when they're doing some of those calls, what they probably need to do in the situations that you're describing there is basically just increase their bandwidth availability so they don't have to compress the voice so much, because then you do start to lose that quality.
That's right. Matthew Dickerson's with us this morning, chatting all things technology. Now, one of the most exciting things, I guess, in sort of personalised healthcare and technology of the past decade or so is the amount of whiz-bang gadgets that companies have been able to throw onto our wristwatches.
It is quite incredible. I do remember years ago talking to someone in a sporting goods store saying, I hate how I've got to wear this chest band and wear this thing on my shoulder to track where I am. And I wish all that could happen in the watch. And the person laughed at me and said, that'll never happen in the watch. Well, now, not only do we have things like heart rate and ECG and blood oxygen, in the next couple of years, we're going to see some things that I don't know how they're going to do them, Ewan. The first one that blows me away is blood pressure. Now, anyone that's had their blood pressure taken knows you've got this big cuff you put around your bicep and it blows up and shrinks down. And they're going to be able to get to the stage, they say within 2 years, that your wristwatch will be able to measure your blood pressure without needing that sort of cuff. Just measure the blood pressure by detecting the blood that's going through your veins in your wrist, which isn't a great place to measure that sort of information, and be able to give you a reasonably accurate reading for your blood pressure. And a lot of these things they talk about, they say, they're not perfectly accurate. They give you an indication. And if you're worried about something, then obviously go and see your medical professional to get some real advice rather than relying totally on your watch. But blood pressure was one. Temperature, and I can see them getting temperature. I can see how that might work. And temperature, obviously, at the moment, we all know. We're all experts on it now. We know what our temperature is meant to be. We walk into somewhere, we get checked for our temperature. Oh, what's our temperature reading today? But having that temperature reading on your watch will give you an early indication, not just for things like COVID-19, but can give you an early indication for a whole range of medical issues. So that's one that I can see being easily handled by a watch, and something that we'll get to that point. But then we start to get to more subtle things. So when we wear our watch when we sleep, for example, we can detect not only sleep patterns, but, for example, sleep apnea. So people might wake up in the morning thinking, gee, I'm a bit tired this morning. I'll turn on you and you'll wake me up and get me going for the day. But I don't know why I feel so tired. They may have sleep apnea and not even realise it. They might have woken up 20 or 30 times during the night because they stopped breathing effectively. So again, a watch can track those sort of things. And then the last one, I really don't know how they're going to do this one, Ewan, but checking for early onset of diabetes or blood sugar levels to check for diabetes. 1.2 million Aussies have diabetes at the moment, so it is a big issue in this nation. Normally, if you're going to check for blood sugar levels, you've got to prick your finger and actually get some blood to be sampled. I assume the watch isn't going to put a needle through your wrist and actually start to check your blood sample. So how they're going to check blood sugar levels through your wrist is unknown to me. I can hardly wait to see it. But again, that one they say they'll have within 3 years.
Wow. Well, one way that you could imagine that they might do it is a similar way to anyone who's got diabetes at the moment may be familiar with sort of patches and pumps and those sorts of things, where you do kind of have a little needle that goes through and sort of stays on your skin all day, and then that can Bluetooth, I imagine, maybe to your watch to give you an update on it. So that could be a possibility in terms of how they do that. But I'm with you. I can't see how you can get around it without sort of getting a drop of blood somewhere onto the watch. So that's the future.
And they're trying to be non-invasive with all of this. So the watch they're attempting to do all this in is not involving something else somewhere else on the body. And I know what you're saying with those patches, and that was one of the things I thought of too. But when I read more about it, they kept talking about non-invasive, and I figure a patch somewhere stuck on with a little needle going in sounds like invasive. It's invasive.
Yeah. Now, speaking of invasive, let's go to the most invasive thing that we can possibly think of in terms of personalised healthcare. And this is the idea, although I do really like it, of smart toilets. How might that work?
Well, we've seen some smart toilets across the world in some experiments, but no one's really talked about getting serious about installing a smart toilet in your home. But that's where we're headed to next, is actually getting to the stage where you'll have a smart toilet. Now, we know about things like bowel cancer. People reach 50, they get their pack sent out by the government, and it's all a bit ugly to go and do that testing and send that sample off. But if you could have that happening automatically all the time, the number of diseases and the things they could monitor for are quite incredible. So anything that's involving gastrointestinal disease, obviously. Believe it or not, you can monitor blood pressure with what comes out of your body. Things like urine samples can tell you whether you're getting enough of all the vitamins and minerals that you need in your daily health. You're not going to go and do all these tests on a regular basis, but hold on, if you had a toilet that actually did all that for you, then maybe that'd be okay. And the toilets, you talk about invasive, then the toilets actually not just test the chemical processes that come out, but they've got cameras as well that actually check the look of what's coming out of you to make sure it looks like it should be right. And so you combine cameras with all the chemical processing and chemical testing, and you then get a diagnostic chart of what comes out of your body. Now, obviously, when you come and visit me, when we can finally visit each other again, Ewan, when you come and visit me, I don't want your samples mucking up my samples. So when you walk into the toilet, you say who you are, you walk in, hi, Matthew Dickerson, your toilet recognises you by your voice and then tracks your sample specific to you. And I think that's a really good thing as well, so that then you can combine data from, say, your watch and your toilet and take that to the doctor and say, here you go, here's what my toilet tells me, here's what my watch tells me, can you give me some medical advice using your professional expertise to tell me where I'm headed? So this type of thing in tracking human health, and again, we seem to be getting unhealthier across the world, things like obesity, diabetes we mentioned, we seem to be getting unhealthier across the world. So we're looking for technology, obviously, to solve all problems, which technology does.
Yeah, and of course, some people listening to this, Matthew, might go, that sounds absolutely gross, and I don't want cameras peering up at my backside while I go to the bathroom. But in some ways, isn't it better to have that done in your own home with a computer that doesn't know you from your next-door neighbour, for example, as opposed to having a GP have to do it, in their clinic? So
I'm with you. I'm with you, absolutely. Yeah. It does sound a bit interesting, especially as a visitor. Look, when you go to the toilet, you just say your name, and then it'll track what's happening. You go, I might hold on a bit longer, thanks.
I know. He's back again. Matthew Dickerson, always great to catch up with you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ewan. Chat in 4 weeks.
Matthew Dickerson is a technologist.